you ready to rock and roll? Let's do this. So look, ocean plastic, people have probably heard about it before in many different ways, and it's generally a bit of a doom and gloom issue. You probably heard about the fact that there's about a garbage truck worth of plastic entering our oceans every minute, a garbage truck a minute. They reckon there'll be more plastic than fish by 2050. So it's all pretty doom and gloom, but obviously to solve a problem, you need to understand it. And we were actually keen to know what the Australian public's understanding of this issue was a few years ago. So Ocean Protect actually created some questions for an independent survey. So we set the questions and we got an independent survey company to actually ask these questions to about 1,000 people from all across Australia, all demographics, all locations. And we asked them a bunch of questions. And this is one of them. What is the biggest source of plastic pollution in the world's oceans? So, okay, plastic's a big problem. How's it getting there? So we gave people 4 options. You know, is it litter and debris released at sea? Is it commercial fishing nets? Is it sewage? Is it stormwater? Or is it littering at the beach? And I've actually asked this to a bunch of engineers over the years as well. And I'd suggest that majority of engineers would say option 1, commercial fishing nets. Sometimes sewage, and even stormwater engineers generally don't say stormwater. But what do the Australian publics think? So this is actually the survey results. So this is what the 1,000 people responded with. So you can see about 29% thought litter and debris released at sea, about 27% thought sewage, 18% thought littering at the beach, 24% thought stormwater, 2% had no idea. But generally, let's face it, most people had no idea. This is almost like a random number generating. If you asked people what their favorite color is, they probably get an even 25% spread of 4 different colors. But fundamentally, we know through various scientific studies that about 80% of all ocean plastic is coming from the land. So 80% of ocean plastic is coming from land-based sources. And if you look at this infographic from Eunomia, which is a UK-based research organisation, they basically show where it's coming from and what types of plastics and where is it ending up. But fundamentally, the lion's share, about 80%, is actually coming from land. And the key mechanism as to how that plastic gets there is stormwater. So our urban environments are beautifully set up to get stormwater away from people and property as quickly and efficiently as possible through drainage, so stormwater infrastructure. So when rain falls, it washes our streets and car parks and roads clean and into pits. Those pits flow to pipes. Those pipes generally flow to creeks, waterways, estuaries, bays, oceans, etc. So it should be no surprise that whilst our stormwater systems are fantastic at getting rid of stormwater into our oceans and waterways, it's also extremely efficient at discharging a whole bunch of pollution into our oceans and waterways as well. And it's a key contributing factor as to why stormwater is such a key source of ocean plastic. At Ocean Protect, and I'm sure there's probably a whole bunch of stormwater professionals in attendance as we speak as well. Look, if you ever looked down into a gross pollutant trap or some sort of other stormwater treatment asset, you can see the plastic that is accumulated in these devices. It's generally, if you're looking at a wet sump GPT like these ones, it's generally a whole bunch of floating plastic on the surface, such as single-use bottles, polystyrene, etc. A whole bunch of manky stuff in the water column, and a whole bunch of pretty manky sediment at the bottom as well. And look, whether it's a end-of-line GPT or sort of galley baskets, the overwhelming majority of the plastic loads are single-use plastics. So single-use plastic bags, wrappers, bottles, cigarettes, etc. And look, this just shows some examples of some of the stuff that we pull out of our devices every day. I'll give you an example. This is actually what we looked at the contents of what we pulled out of just 8 of those gully baskets. So these gully baskets back here that I showed before. These are what we call ocean guards, gully pit inserts. And we basically had 8 of these in a pretty typical street in Western Sydney for a period of 5 months. And you can see what we pulled out of it. So you can see more or less 850 pieces of plastic, including cigarette butts, drink lids, cans, cups, straws, etc. And you can see it all there on the left there. And it was about 130 kilograms of sediment. Now, it's worthwhile noting that sediment isn't just stuff you just chuck on your garden. It contains a whole bunch of very, very nasty chemicals and contaminants, particularly microplastics. So again, going back to this eunomia infographic that I showed before, one of the top types of microplastics found in our oceans and waterways, if you look at this little window in here, is vehicle tire dust, i.e. vehicle tire wear and tear. And there's a whole bunch of growing evidence, just reasonably recent, around the scourge of vehicle tire wear and tear in our waterways and in our oceans. And it's something that's almost never thought about. And it's either vehicle tires or the top or the second top source of microplastics, depending on what sort of research paper you're looking at. If you look at the IUCN report, they put washing machine fibers a little bit above vehicle tire wear and tear, but equally road debris is still a major source of microplastics, even if you ignore microplastics, so stuff like road paint, etc., and stuff like that, which again, long story short, the key source of microplastics is road runoff, i.e. stormwater from our road environments. Now, currently in Australia, we've got very laxy-daisy, i.e. no stormwater quality requirements for roads, which is generally unacceptable, but it's a growing problem. And it's vehicle tire wear and tear isn't just natural rubber from a rubber tree. It's a very, there's a whole bunch of proprietary mixtures of a whole bunch of very nasty chemicals. And they've shown that some of those chemicals at least are killing waterway ecology. Now, you might have heard, we did a podcast recently with Dr. Ed Kay from the University of Washington talking about coho salmon. So these are meter-long salmon in Puget Sound in northwest USA, basically dropping dead en masse every time it rains because of a chemical called 6-PPD in vehicle tire wear and tear, which is like a anti-ozonation chemical that they basically put in tires to stop it from degrading in the atmosphere. I don't want to diminish the importance of vehicle tires, and it's critical that they actually function properly, but they are clearly a source of significant contamination across the planet. So a growing issue that we really should be doing something about. And it's no surprise, our roads, road runoff goes into pits, into pipes, into our waterways. It's a fantastic way of getting stormwater away, but subsequently a whole bunch of vehicle tire wear and tear and other nasties from our road environment, which drains into our waterways and oceans. Do you think the Australian public care? Like, there's a whole bunch of things we've got to worry about in our day-to-day lives, but you think the Australian public actually care too much about the state of our oceans and waterways? And this is something I want to ask you guys. So in the chat, you're welcome to put up what you think your top concern would be. So, but this is a question. So you've got the list of the options on the right-hand side. So I'm more than happy if you'd like to put in what your top concern would be in the chat. I'm happy to read them out. But the question that we asked our survey recipients, and I'll ask the same thing of you guys, is, okay, with increasing population growth in Australia, what impacts are you most concerned about? So you can see there's a whole bunch of options there. Oh, sorry, I've just been told chat is disabled. Just give me a sec. How about, here we go. Here we go. I think the chat is now enabled. So thanks for that. Denise Hardesty, fantastic. So hopefully you guys can put stuff in the chat now. And it has to be said, shout out to Denise Hardesty from CSIRO, head honcho from the Marine Debris Research Team. So fantastic to have you here. Cray's going to say marine and waterway health. Of course you would, Cray. But look, I encourage everyone else to sort of put their concerns in. Generally, I'm told, and I'm asking engineers most of the time, they generally say it's traffic, If you ask the hipster engineers and stormwater professionals, it's generally housing affordability, because we eat too much avocado on toast, apparently, or jobs, so look, just the stuff you hear day in, day out. I see quite a few people saying traffic. Yeah, every half an hour, breakfast television, there's someone in a chopper talking about traffic in our CBD environments and Gold Coast of Brisbane, etc. And it's only going to get worse with increasing population growth. No one, or very few people ever say waterway health. I see Denise is saying waterway health. Of course you would, Denise. I feel as I'm preaching to the choir here in some respects, but generally I ask people, where would they place marine and waterway health on that list? And the general response is probably somewhere down the bottom. But I'm going to show you the results of those surveys. I can see that another one saying traffic. Thank you, Asif. And there's a few others saying traffic. Yeah, okay. I'm going to show you the results of the survey. Put you guys out of your misery. I can feel the suspense building. Sarah Jo says marine and waterway health as well. So I'm going to show the least concerns to the top concerns. So car parking, second bottom, jobs, fourth bottom, air quality, middle, traffic, fourth from the top. The number one concern of the Australian public, at least according to this survey, was marine and waterway health. Now I'll let that sink in for a little bit. The number one concern of the Australian public, given those list of options, was marine and waterway health. And generally I get someone saying to me at this stage, Brad has fudged the numbers. Okay, but that's fair. But I actually pinched the question from a bigger research study by the Anna Bligh government in 2010, looking at Southeast Queensland. And they did a survey, about 3,500 survey recipients from Noosa to the Gold Coast, Brisbane to Toowoomba, same question. And they gave them the same options, but also some others. Again, marine and waterway health was the top concern. The reason I sort of highlight this is that, long story short, if you're a politician or you're talking to politicians, there's votes in doing something about protecting the health of our waterways and oceans. Generally, I'm sort of eyes are on. If I could see you, which I can't, I'm sure you'd be like, oh my God, mind blown, mind blown. I'm only just warming up in terms of mind blowing as well, by the way. So keep with me if I've already blown your mind. Have a drink of water, because there's more to come. And it should be no surprise. One of the most annoying environmental problems that bugbears everybody. Now, whether you're a tree hugging hippie like me, or whether you don't care about the environment at all, litter annoys people. It's just irritating. It's climate change can be a little bit complicating for a lot of people. There's some debate as to whether it's a real thing or not. I'm not going to get into that discussion now, but certainly when you look at litter, it's definitely from anthropogenic sources. It's definitely from human. It's going to pollute our environment. It currently is. It's annoying. We should do something about it. So this is the results of a survey by QUT and Healthy Land and Water a few years ago, and they actually asked their recipients to rank their top environmental concerns, and again, litter was number one. And it should be no surprise, we live in the day, I'm sure you've seen images of straws getting pulled out of turtles' noses, albatrosses with their guts full of plastic items and cigarette lighters, etc. You've probably walked down into the waterway yourself, or done a canoe trip or something, and you can see litter often on the water surface, and it is annoying. Also, there's a whole bunch of documentaries that I'm sure many of you guys have actually watched, which are generally free on the internet or Netflix or something like that. There's some absolute doozies, more or less are very much focused on the scourge of plastic pollution across the planet. And then there's a whole bunch of news reports highlighting the fact that plastic has an enormously detrimental impact on our marine wildlife. Now, whether it's seabirds off Lord Howe Island, or if it's Darryl Blatchley from the Philippines pulling 40 kilograms of plastic out of the belly of a juvenile whale, you often see news reports like this, and they're often obviously not very good at all. And it's not just an Asian issue or a problem coming from Africa. This is straight out of the Brisbane Times, quoting Dr. Kathy Townsend, a superstar from the University of Sunshine Coast. And she's looked at sea turtles in Moreton Bay, literally my waterway, and basically found about 30% of them have been found dead, and their guts are full of plastic. So again, that's just downstream of Brisbane. Moreton Bay, turtles found, and about a third have their guts full of plastic. Really unacceptable, but we can do something about it. And then you look at, it's not just about ecological impacts of plastic pollution as well. More recently, and it is reasonably recently, that they're actually finding plastic in us. And look, that long story short, there was a study not too long ago finding plastic in poo, in our own feces. They're finding plastic in infant breast milk, in the placentas of unborn babies, and more recently they're finding that microplastics can infiltrate the blood-brain barrier. Now, you often hear the statistic that the average person consumes about a credit card worth of plastic every week. Now, the science behind that is a bit rubbery, but we are certainly consuming microplastics. Now, how much is safe? Don't know. How much are we consuming? It varies. But clearly, whatever the amount is, there's a potential risk to human health. What that risk is, I don't think really any of us know at this stage. And I'm really encouraged by scientists looking into this further. I'm sure Denise Hardesty will have an opinion about this, but it looks like it could have a potential health risk. And that's obviously not a good thing. And a key mechanism as to how it's getting into us is inhalation. So we obviously got to keep breathing. So it's a bit of a concern. Straight off the bat, let's just drop some truth bombs. So about 1.5 tons of plastic enters Australian waterways every hour. The vast majority of plastic entering Australian waterways and our oceans is from land, and stormwater is the #1 source of pollution in our urban waterways. The vast majority of plastic on Australian beaches is from Australia. I'm going to say that again. The vast majority of plastic on Australian beaches is from Australia. And Denise Hardesty can lay claim to that little bit of research along with her team. The vast majority of urban environments, high litter generating areas in Australia, have no stormwater treatment assets. So when rain falls and washes our streets clean and roads and urban environments, that water just generally washes into pits, pipes, and creeks and streams and rivers and estuaries and oceans without any sort of stormwater treatment asset. But we actually do have a lot of stormwater treatment assets across Australia, but the vast majority of those assets that have been installed at great expense to stop that pollution actually aren't being maintained, and the pollution that they accumulate is not removed. Thank you, Sarah Jo. Yes, I love dropping truth bombs. Yeah, there's some definitely truth bombs in this slide. Again, for me, the last one is the lowest hanging fruit. The vast majority of installed stormwater treatment assets don't get maintained, so that pollution that they're accumulating or retaining is not being removed. So subsequently, incoming pollutant loads just bypass these assets that have been installed at great expense across Australia. It's like if we had the Queensland government having cars, and we just didn't maintain them after ever, and we just had these cars littered across the highway sidelines across the state. It's staggering. It just annoys the bejeebers out of me. And I don't want to, obviously I work for a company that sells and manages stormwater treatment assets, but fundamentally we are just a small piece of the puzzle. If you look at the waste management hierarchy, which is what I've got on the screen now, stormwater is actually only one step higher than cleanup. So the most expensive, the least effective, the one that is cleanup. Stormwater treatment is better than that, but it's only a little bit better. Fundamentally, we've got to avoid the use as a primary focus, basically banning single-use plastics in particular. Then we obviously can look to reduce and reuse our plastic materials where possible, enhancing recycling infrastructure and practices, etc. stormwater treatment is certainly an aspect, like basically the final lifeguard protecting our oceans and waterways from pollution. But there's so much attention on cleanup. You might have seen Boyne Slat's Ocean Cleanup project. More recently, the Seabin project, led by Pete Galinsky. These are and obviously there's a whole bunch of community groups like Sea Shepherd Australia doing a whole bunch of cleanup activities. Don't get me wrong, fantastic efforts. I totally take my hat off to anyone who's cleaning up our marine environment and beaches and waterways. But if cleanup is the only thing that we ever do, it is the thing. Sorry, I'm going to mispronounce this. If the cleanup is the only thing we ever do, we'll do it forever. So we obviously need to lift our game with those higher waste management hierarchical items. So you might know that Ocean Protect and Stormwater New South Wales have been really driving a zero litter to ocean campaign across Australia. It's basically we're advocating for a zero litter to ocean by 2040. So nothing like a cigarette, but 5 millimeters or bigger to flow to any Australian waterway by 2040. And that involves a whole bunch of stuff. Primarily a ban on single-use plastics. And number two, making sure new development across the country has best practice stormwater treatment. We actually have that in many parts of Australia, particularly in Eastern Australia, but it's not uniform. The big deficiency, as I mentioned before, is that lack of asset management. And so that's, for me, is a key aspect of the zero littered ocean strategy. But fundamentally, it's all about achieving zero littered ocean by 2040. So achieving nothing more like a cigarette butt, like 5 millimeters or bigger, to flow to any Australian waterway from any high litter generating area, like an urban environment, high density CBD, commercial and industrial areas by 2040. If you'd like to know more, that's on the zerolitteredocean.com.au website. And generally, well, I'll give you an example. When I mentioned this target at the Australian Marine Science Association conference, I said, who thinks this target's crazy? And I'll ask you guys the same question. You can put it in the chat on a scale of 0 to 100. How crazy you think I am. So 100 being absolutely bonkers, 0 being, bang on, totally right, and it's going to be achieved, no worries at all. So I'm more than happy to take criticism. But when I mentioned at the AMSA conference, I'd say 99% of the audience were like, no way, never going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen. Well, we actually pinched the idea from California. So the state of California, I'll say that again, the state of California have set a zero trash to waterways target by 2030. So they set this target in, I can see a whole bunch of people. So, I can see your ratings coming through now. So Carlo thinks 45%. Dean says 20%. Asif says 20%. Peter thinks I'm 100% crazy, but not about this. But we pinched the target from California. So yeah, they set a target in 2009. It sat in the courts or bounced around the courts for about 3 years. But long story short, they're working towards it, and they're on target to achieve zero trash to waterways by 2030. How that was initiated was basically the local environmental groups and community groups sued Caltrans, which is, I think, the state government group. I think they do a lot of the road infrastructures, management, etc. And that initiated the zero trash to waterways target by 2030. And there's a whole bunch of other jurisdictions in California that have also started working towards the same target. It's what they call, you might have heard the term total maximum daily load targets. So various jurisdictions, including California, have set a a total maximum daily load target of 0 litter in their waterways. So you can't have litter in their waterways. Cool. But what about in Australia? Oh, it's okay. In America, they're a bit funky. Surely not in Australia. Wrong. The city of Ryde, on the back of some significant lobbying efforts by Ocean Protect and others, were the first council in Australia to actually commit to zero litter to river by 2030. So that's a council area within the Sydney CBD, obviously. Burwood Council were the next to jump on board. Again, another Sydney CBD council area. Obviously small areas, but still pivotal. City of Sydney, similar, set a zero litter to ocean target by 2030. I think that was very much led by Councillor Craig Chung, who was a bit gobsmacked by some of the findings that they were finding in relation to some of the GPT audits that others have undertaken. So kudos to, I think it was Optimal Stormwater did the GPT audit for City of Sydney and found that, long story short, they needed to fix them up and get them maintained and get that pollution removed. Northern Beaches Council was another council area within New South Wales that have set a zero litter to ocean target by 2030. Fantastic. What about in Queensland? Yeah, Noosa Council have actually set a zero litter to river target in their draft Noosa River Plan. So well done, Noosa, my old hometown. Very recently, now people might not be familiar with the Georges River in Sydney, a massive river system that drains to Botany Bay and subsequently the ocean. They've initiated a zero litter in Georges River campaign as well. So how good is that? That's only like about a month or two old. Puts wind in my sails, I tells you. And I'm very happy that Denise is here so I can talk to the fact that CSIRO have also set a goal of an 80% reduction in plastic waste entering the Australian environment by 2030. How cool is that? So these guys are obviously our very well recognized and esteemed scientific organization. And if they think they think we can do it, I'm sure we can. But also a whole bunch of CSIRO research, particularly thanks to Kathy Willis, has actually shown that we're actually doing a great job in the last 6 years. We've actually, local efforts have actually cut plastic waste on Australian beaches by almost 30% in 6 years. 30% in 6 years, that's pretty good going. I reckon by 2030, we could easily achieve 80%. And I reckon more or less close to 100% by 2040. Meanwhile, Blacktown City Council have also established a water-sensitive urban design compliance program, basically a program to help ensure that stormwater treatment assets on privately owned sites like fast food centres, shopping centres, petrol stations, a program to make sure that those assets are appropriately maintained. And in New South Wales, what we generally see is people follow the lead of Blacktown City Council. And if you're keen to look to see how you develop your own water compliance program, like I said, we've got Daniel Ryder coming on next month to talk about how to do that in your local government area as well. So that's really exciting. And we've been in the background liaising with a whole bunch of councils about how they can potentially do something similar to Blacktown City Council as well. But if you'd like to know more, feel free to reach out to me or Daniel Ryder from Blacktown City Council. You've probably seen a whole bunch of more sort of like this Asia Pacific targets and initiatives. So, the draft Pacific Regional Declaration on the Prevention of Marine litter and plastic pollution, led by the Honourable Susan Lee, federal MP. And obviously, we've had a whole bunch of Australian states and territories commit to various bans on single-use plastics. I think just today I think WA might have banned single-use coffee cups, I think this week. So that's all fantastic. So fundamentally, before I go into that, I should, as a purely from my backyard perspective, how about Moreton Bay? So my little where I live is probably around about there. Moreton Bay is more or less the receiving environment for much of southeast Queensland. Could we achieve a zero litter to river target for Moreton Bay? Well, you might have seen the fact that we've got this little old event called the Olympics happening in about 10 years. And we've set some very lofty goals in relation to making sure that these Olympics are the green Olympics. So clearly, surely an aspect of that would be to actually appropriately protect our oceans and waterways, particularly given that some events are actually happening in the Moreton Bay environment in particular. If sort of some of the more local efforts in relation to cleanup or anything to go by, though, we've got some work to do. So the Ocean Crusaders volunteers, they're currently removing, this is a news report from a couple of days ago. They're removing about 1.3 tons of debris from Brisbane waterways as we speak. So there's plenty of work to do, but there's certainly opportunity to do make a real difference here. And look, full disclosure, my local MPs probably don't like the fact that I live in their jurisdiction, because I'm annoying. So Pete, it's not just you that I annoy, it's other people. But look, I've actually worked out and done some rough estimates based on some information that I'm privy to. And I've basically estimated that it would cost about $32 million over a 10-year period to actually achieve what I would consider zero litter to bay by 2032. Now, I reckon that's money well spent. And it's not just about feathering the nests of Ocean Protect or other companies putting in stormwater treatment assets. A big focus is actually about making sure that the assets that we already have in the ground are appropriately functioning, and that pollution that they are retaining is removed, and that so they can keep protecting our oceans and waterway environments. And if you'd like to know more about that, that little bit of lobbying effort through my local MPs, please let me know. But I reckon that's money well spent. Surely we'll probably spend that just on upgrading a couple of stadiums, I suspect. So I think it would be a very worthwhile investment, and worthwhile noting that these are costs, but don't take in any consideration as to the potential financial benefits associated with actually less pollution in our oceans and waterways. So fundamentally, my talk today is one of hope. You know, ocean plastic pollution can seem very doom and gloom and very overwhelming, but fundamentally, there's an amazing opportunity to actually make a real difference in this regard. But certainly, a key aspect of that hope has to come through better stormwater management across not just Moreton Bay, but Australia and beyond. So thanks very much. If you have any questions, am I going for time? Bang on. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them now. If you'd like to reach out, you're welcome to, obviously. And I can see a few questions have already come in already. But if you have any questions you'd like to pose to me, please let me know. So quite a few people have come in and said, yes, I'm crazy, but in a good way. But if you have any questions, so there's a question around, so a question from Carlo is, how do we prevent microplastics getting into our waterways? Like I said, Carlo, like, so stormwater is a key source of microplastics, and it is, I don't belittle the fact that it's a difficult job, but we can make a huge difference through better stormwater management. So if you look at the key microplastics being particularly vehicle tire wear and tear, but also just the breakdown of larger plastics, if we can essentially reduce and avoid the use of those single-use plastics in particular to prevent them from breaking down further into microplastics. But fundamentally, if we can actually implement some better stormwater management, particularly in our high litter generating areas or our highly trafficked areas, particularly roads, I think that would go a long way to actually reducing the amount of plastics into our downstream environment. So just a reminder, if you can there's a lot of comments or questions coming through the chat. If you got questions, please put them in the Q&A. It makes it a lot more easy for me to track and actually answer these questions. I'm just going to try and through there. Oh, here we go. Comment from Sarah Joe. Georges River Zero Litter Ocean has their latest update meeting at 2 p.m. today. My Lord. Tom says, best practice stormwater management should start by establishing a baseline removal of pollutants to less than 100 micron. This should be the marker for equipment suppliers and SWH designers should aspire to achieving when designing their next stormwater harvesting scheme. Go New South Wales councils to setting these zero litter targets. Go Blacktown City Council. Yeah, totally. How are we measuring the zero plastics to ocean? What's the metric this is being evaluated against? It's a great question. I'd say it's almost impossible to measure, but in terms of just day-to-day runoff. But what I would suggest it involves would basically be appropriate GIS mapping to work out, like initially, to work out actually where your high litter generating areas are. So I indicate they're generally like CBD environments, highly trafficked areas, etc. And then work out what stormwater treatment assets are in those areas already and what condition they're in, and seeing what actually more you need to do to actually achieve basically a good coverage of stormwater treatment across those high litter generating areas. Now, it might be stormwater treatment assets, but there might also be other initiatives that you could look to implement to significantly reduce the amount of litter and plastics going into our waterways from those areas. The zero litter to ocean metric also, it's worth pointing out, it's really up to, like, there's obviously, we define it in the zero litter ocean policy, but some councils or government areas might actually choose their own way of defining what zero litter to ocean means. It doesn't necessarily mean, no litter into any ocean environment from anywhere from Australia. I'm looking at high litter generating areas, and I'm also talking about 5 millimeters or bigger being the target pollutant. But fundamentally, it's not just about litter as well. We know that we're basically, like, the survey response I showed before is that, yeah, litter is obviously a key environmental concern of people, but we're almost using litter as a gateway pollutant. So to advocate for better catchment management and fundamentally reduce pollution load. So obviously if we can stop, say, litter going into our oceans environment through various best management practices, we will obviously stop a whole bunch of other pollutants, including pollutants that will attach to litter, or even other contaminants that will be removed through better catchment management, stormwater management in particular. Yeah, this is a great question from Cray. I understand most ocean cleanup efforts are focused on the surface. Any comments you'd wish to add about particles that have been sunk to the seabed and related impacts? Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to take you back, Cray, to my infographic that I showed before. And so just a reminder, I didn't actually talk about this. This actually talked about, I mainly focused on where ocean plastic is coming from. But a key element of this infographic is the fact that it's estimated only 1% of the plastic in our oceans is at the ocean surface. So again, only 1% roughly of the plastic in our oceans is at the ocean surface. Now, obviously, when it's at the ocean surface, it probably has the potential to causing the most damage to marine ecology. So I don't belittle the fact that that 1% is causing a lot of damage. But obviously, if we're only focusing on removing that surface plastic, we're missing the rest of it. Now, I'm not sure what happens to the plastic after it goes into the ocean environment, as in sinks to the floor, whether it is potentially resuspended, whether it maybe even burped out of the ocean and carried thousands of kilometers, whatever. But certainly, fundamentally, the key focus on preventing plastic in our oceans, or at least even removing it, should be actually stopping it from getting in there in the first place. And the easiest way to, easiest sort of, I guess, intervention will be to stop it in the land environment, or at least just stop its production in the first place before it even gets into our ocean environment. So I don't belittle the fact that Ocean Cleanup and Boyne-Slat, and Pete Galinsky and Seabend Project are doing a great job of actually targeting that surface ocean plastic pollution. But fundamentally, we need to turn the tap off and stop the plastic from getting there in the first place. I can see a whole bunch of other questions coming through. Who championed these changes at councils with these new plastic removal goals? Community groups, employees? Look, I think it was actually initiated, and I'm going to sound like I'm blowing my trumpet, so apologies, but Ocean Protect, particularly Jeremy Brown and myself, we lobbied hard to everyone that would give us an ear to talk about this target. And it was generally the case of, we spoke to a bunch of people, but there was often just one champion within each council. And it was generally a council or mayor who was like, totally get it. They saw the pictures of the inside the GPTs, and we explained that more or less the science that I spoke of just now. And they're like, totally, I get it. Let's do something about it. So to answer your question, it was actually generally a one politician in each council who actually was the champion. Now, I'm not sure what they would be, that they obviously have different motivations, but whether it's benevolent or doing good, but fundamentally they must realize that there's significant community interest and concern in this area, and subsequently votes and actually doing something about this problem. Just looking through, I'm going to go to Dean. Are you having conversations with the IPWEA to look at reaching more councils and water authorities? Not just yet, Dean. More than happy to collaborate with whoever. We did actually speak to Local Government Association of Queensland and New South Wales, and I've tried to reach out to one in Victoria. and have had some success in the Local Government Association of Queensland. And they gave us a floor. They've connected us with a bunch of councils, which has been great, but it hasn't really gone anywhere, to be honest. So if there's any sort of more appetite, or if you've got links that I don't currently have, I'm more than happy to explore that further, for sure. Cool. I think it was a question from, KRG, Russell Cadman. Greetings, Russell. Any research being done on how to combine fish, aquatic, macroinvertebrate passage through GPT so they don't impact waterway biodiversity? Yeah, great question. Look, to the best of my knowledge, no, but I'm not sure. But certainly, I think when you're sort of I think you're probably talking about, trash rack, direct screens that you often see in channels. I actually think they're a bad idea anyway. I'd far prefer to see devices installed further upstream within the catchment. They're more effective. They're far lower risk of blocking and far more likely to actually function appropriately. But obviously, they're not going to cause if they're not in a waterway channel, they're not going to cause any dramas in terms of fish or macroinvertebrate passage. So I'd actually move. I know some councils prefer the trash racks, but fundamentally, I just don't think they're very effective and cause all sorts of dramas as well. Cool. No final questions. Apologies if I've missed some of them. There's been quite a few comments coming through in the chat. But look, without further ado, I'd just like to thank everyone for dialing into my chat today. If you'd like to know more, please feel free to reach out to me personally. I look forward to hopefully seeing you guys sometime soon. So thanks very much for coming along today, and enjoy the rest of your day.